Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski, Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson, Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff, and other initiatives including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's Growable program and our Perspective series. Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society.
Okay, I'll start the slide, and then you can.
Wonderful. Thanks. It's a pleasure to be back in the room with folks. My name's Amy Amantea, and I am the Associate Director of VocalEye Descriptive Arts Society. And I'm going to share a little bit with you all today about what VocalEye does, who we are and what we do. So that's just our opening slide is VocalEye and acknowledging that this is a presentation for Connectra and the Connect Together program. So you can go on to the next slide. Can you put it in slideshow mode for me, please?
Slideshow, 1 minute.
That way we don't need to see all the slides in the corner. We got a full screen. That's wonderful. Okay, so the next slide, please, and thank you. Who is VocalEye? I suppose that's the obvious question. So VocalEye is a nonprofit society. We're a registered charity, and we're the first live description arts service for the blind in Canada. Our mission is to provide greater access to theater, arts, and cultural events for people of all ages who happen to identify as blind or partially sighted. On the next slide is, what do we do? Okay, we provide theater companies and other artists and arts organizations with the support necessary to make their productions and their events more accessible for those audience members through live description, through education, through outreach, and through other services, which I'll talk about in a moment. On the next slide, I have just a little bit of history to share with you. The first live description service in Canada was launched by Kickstart Disability Arts and Culture in 2009 at the Vancouver Playhouse. The theater company was producing a show called The Miracle Worker. Originally named Earsight, that was what the program was called then. The program was then renamed VocalEye and became a separate non-for-profit society in 2012 and a registered charity in 2017. VocalEye actually has been awarded the Achievement Award in Audio Description International, and this came from the American Council of the Blind Audio Description Project. So we've got some awards under our belt too, which I'd like to acknowledge. On the next slide is a list of our services. So I'm going to just run through them quickly and then we'll talk through some of those. So what are our services? VocalEye offers the following services: live description of special events, support materials in accessible fonts and formats, monthly newsletters in accessible formats, touch tours, Theater Buddy volunteers, Theater Buddy training, workshops, describer training, accessibility consultation, equipment rental, and probably more in the periphery, but these are our core services. VocalEye specializes in live description of theater performances for adults, families, and young people who are blind, partially sighted, and our community members who support us as well. So our families and friends and those folks who come with us to theater productions. On the next slide is just a little bit of background about what description is, if folks aren't aware of what description is. So also known as audio description, you may have heard it as live description, you may have heard it as descriptive video. So we actually focus on live description, which refers to the description of the visual elements of a performance or an event that are spoken live. So that's the difference. So like oftentimes we see on television, we hear the SAP, the secondary audio program running, and it's describing the content, but it's recorded into your television program. We're doing this live on the spot in the theater or at any other artistic event that requires description. And so that's a little bit of the difference in what we do. And so it's very much an art form all on its own. VocalEye's describers begin the description about 10 minutes before the show with a brief introduction to the characters, the costumes, and the locations. And then once the show begins, all of the important visual descriptions and physical action are described between the lines of dialogue. All the descriptions are voiced live in real time, and I think that's just really important to remind ourselves, by a trained describer. Only the VocalEye users in the space will hear the description through a small handheld receiver, and I'll share that with you in a moment. And the equipment gets picked up when you come to the theater. So when you come to the theater, there's a VocalEye table that's set up. You can pick up your equipment there, test it, be escorted to your seat, and listen to what we call the pre-show notes. And then, of course, the description of the production. And users are welcome to bring their own headsets if they want. They can use ours. We sterilize our equipment, but you're also welcome to bring your own set of headsets if you happen to have a favorite pair of earbuds. Some of us very much do. Okay, the next slide, please. This is some of the description that I went over. So let's go to the next slide and talk about the equipment. Okay, here's the equipment. So there's an earpiece, and it looks a little bit like what's on your screen. So that earpiece fits over your ear, and the earpiece itself doesn't necessarily need to go into the ear, which keeps it much cleaner and more of a sanitary earpiece. Ours actually are plastic as opposed to this one, which looks like the rubber tip to the end. So they just sit against the ear. They don't go inside the ear. And it's only in one ear. So you have one ear that's available to listen to the music of a musical, or the lines of dialogue in the play, or if we're in an art gallery, your curator perhaps sharing information. There's all sorts of ways of using the equipment, but mostly we use them in live theater productions. So I can hear what's happening, and in my other ear, I hear what the describer is telling me. So that's what the earpiece looks like. And on the next slide, now this isn't exactly what our handset looks like, but it's relatively close. So it's about the size of a deck of cards. It's a small black device. It's very analog. There's no screen to it. There are no fancy buttons to it. In fact, it's got one button, which is a rotating dial, like a volume up and down. And literally it goes all the way to off, and then you turn it on by rotating it, and the volume goes up. So those are really your only choices, is to adjust the volume. And if the volume gets too low, it goes off, right? So it's a really simple way of being able to adjust volume in real time. If you find that, I don't know, there's a musical number happening and you want the describer to be a little louder in your ear, or if there's a really, I don't know, soft, delicate scene happening on stage and you want your describer to be a little bit quieter in your ear. So you have full autonomy to adjust the volume as you see fit. And again, it's about the size of a deck of cards, and the technology is, again, it's very simple technology in terms of what's available with technology today. It's just a radio frequency that happens within the theater space. So it's really simple one-way radio technology that's happening. On the next slide, please. So this is a little bit about some support materials in accessible formats. So there are lots of different formats, and for folks who are blind or partially sighted, you know, there are formats that are accessible and not accessible. So PDFs, for example, are notoriously not very easy to navigate with a screen reader. We often don't have screen reader technology with us in a theater. This is happening more and more as we see programs that are being accessed through QR codes within the theater, but if they're in a PDF, I may not be able to read them. So having those available in Word document can be helpful. That would be more of a theater's responsibility than VocalEye. But what VocalEye might offer would be, for example, a Braille song list. And so Braille, if you're not familiar with what Braille is it's a code. It's a series of dots that that are representative of the letters of the alphabet. And depending on the series of dots, it is sort of transcribed to letters and then into sentences. So you feel that with the tips of your fingers. And of course, folks who are completely blind from a very young age or birth are first hand Braille readers. We would call them native Braille readers. So it's their first form of literacy. So you can actually read the song list in Braille in the dark because you don't need any light or sight to read Braille, right? So it's a nice thing to have if you're sitting in a long musical and you want to know and follow along with what musical numbers might be happening next. So we often have some Braille song lists available. In COVID, things have changed a little bit, but they're often available. On our next slide is another one of the services that we provide, which is access to our monthly newsletter. And some might say this doesn't sound like a service, but I will tell you that our newsletter is designed with love. It's very carefully crafted to be accessible. You can get it in a couple of different formats. You can get it in an HTML format with full photos and all of the sort of design elements. It's also screen reader accessible, or you can request it in a plain text format, text only. So you're really getting it kind of like a Word document with none of the visuals. We do this because we know that there are folks with partial sight that like to enjoy photos, and that we have friends and family and donors that are all part of a sight-centric society that really want to be able to access our newsletters as well. So we're trying to make things as accessible as possible for as many people as possible in our space. Our newsletters will contain information about our in-person productions. So what theaters we're at, what shows are happening, times, dates, how you purchase tickets, all of those things. They'll also contain our online programming, our workshops that we might be providing to folks, any opportunities to learn to be a describer, to become a volunteer, to become a donor, all of those things that maybe typical newsletters provide, but ours is quite special to me because there's always some lovely little fun nuggets and things like that. And we often like to share information about what other events might be happening outside of VocalEye that are relevant to the blind community. So if there's a production maybe that we're not describing, or an online production out of Toronto or something like that, we'll often share that information if we have it available to do, because we want our community to be able to have access to as many opportunities as they can to experience art. We also have a hotline. The hotline really only shares with folks what is available on our online platform, just so that things aren't confusing, but also tells you how to access our in-person programming lists if you want to access that. Because on the online platform, we have folks that join us from all over Canada, Turtle Island. They join us from all over the United States. Some have joined us as far as Australia and Japan. So the hotline is something that, or the online platform rather, is something that is accessed by more than just the local community. The next slide is touch tours. What is a touch tour? So there's a photo on your screen and it's a puppet and somebody who is feeling the face of the puppet and wearing a glove on their hand to do that, as our skin oils can sometimes damage puppets and other props. So this particular person is wearing a set of gloves, and a touch tour is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. So VocalEye brings users onto the stage for kind of a hands-on experience of selected props, costumes, set pieces from the show. This is usually assisted by somebody in the cast or in the crew, maybe a stage manager. And touch tours are only offered at select performances. So not every performance. Often what we've discovered is if you come to the show at 8 o'clock and it's over at 10, you just want to rush to get home, right? So sticking around for a touch tour may not be the most equitable thing. In COVID era, we have sort of redesigned those to be a little bit more COVID friendly. So people are sanitizing their hands before and after touching the object so that it goes to the next person, or wearing a pair of gloves perhaps. And the touch tours typically take place after the production. There's all sorts of reasons why, some barriers to actors and whatnot, contracts, equity contracts, actors who are warming up, to why we can't necessarily come in before shows to experience this. But I would submit that having access to a touch tour is fun, whether you are able to experience it before or after the production. So that's one of the highlights of some of the programming that we get to do. And often we do it after matinees, right? So your show's done, I don't know, by 4:30ish. And so you've got time. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to mention, which isn't on a specific slide, is our notable social events, which don't change slides just yet on me. Sorry. Can you go back to the last slide? Thanks. When we see a production and we have a touch tour, oftentimes on a matinee show, we will follow that with a notable social event. And that's an opportunity for folks who were at the theater to come with us to a local restaurant, and VocalEye will usually purchase some appetizers for the table, and then other people are welcome to purchase dinner or extra food. But it's just a nice way of being able to build community with folks and spend time together, maybe talk about the play, maybe talk about other things. But it's much easier to gather and do a kind of social event when the show ends in the afternoon as opposed to when it ends in the evening. And there's always a prize draw at the end of each one, so that's rather fun. Thanks for allowing me to share that. Okay, so the next slide is about theater buddies and theater buddy volunteers. So we have theater buddy volunteers. There's a photo on the screen which is looking at two people's backs as they're walking in front of us. And one of them on the left is one of our blind patrons, and the individual on the right is the sighted guide. And sighted guide is a technique where somebody with eyesight, and I would say as a person with partial sight myself, I have done sighted guide. It is the ultimate joke in our community about the blind leading the blind, where it's absolutely relevant. I digress, but this is a technique where if you're a guide dog user, if you're a white cane user, you can hold on to the arm of a sighted person just below their elbow, roughly around that area, and they can guide you around obstacles, and then you don't have to think about the stress of navigating. This becomes really helpful in areas like Granville Island if we're doing live programming, which can be quite challenging to navigate. So it takes the stress and the anxiety off of the blind person to try and figure out where they're going. Our theater buddies will meet you at a bus stop. So it doesn't really matter what theater venue we go to. We have meetup buddies, and they will meet at a local bus stop close to the theater. And you'll get an email with all those details: time, meetup location, who's meeting you, how to contact them if you're late, if they're late, that kind of thing. And then they will walk with you to the theater. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to get there, or I can't afford a cab, this is a really great option. So people will meet at the transit stop. Often we meet as a group. If there are more than one or two people coming, we walk together, and we go to the theater together. So it's a really lovely way of, again, building community, but taking all of the barriers that can exist when trying to visit a theater or another arts and culture event, and reducing those barriers as much as possible. Okay, the next slide, please, is the Theater Buddy Training Workshop and the Sighted Guide Technique Workshop. So these are part of the workshop series that we teach. I teach through VocalEye, and we teach a lot of things. We teach about sighted guide technique in particular. We teach about guide dog etiquette. We teach about language, about the disability etiquette in general, communication tips. And these workshops are offered on a regular basis. So we ask all of our theater buddies and all of our staff, to be honest, everybody that's a part of our team takes this workshop. And then if you are interested in being a theater buddy on a more regular basis, then perhaps you're on a list, and you might be contacted for particular shows. Say, hey, we need a theater buddy, you live in this area, are you interested? As a theater buddy, you would get tickets to go to the show that you are volunteering to do guiding for. So that's kind of a nice little perk. And it's really, really helpful for our patrons and builds community. Again, can't say that enough. It's really one of the things that I love about VocalEye is the building of community. It's really lovely to be with folks that are in my community and experience art together. We have a shared experience. So these workshops get offered on a fairly regular basis. I would say probably 4 to 6 times a year. So every handful of months we offer them. They usually take place at the BMO Theatre Center, thanks to our partners at the Arts Club that offer us a space to be able to teach these workshops. And it's been a great benefit to our staff and our theater buddies to have some foundational understanding of the disability and the blind experience before interacting with our patrons, so that everybody is safe and feels dignified in how we communicate with our patrons. Our next slide is on describer training. So describer training is a unique thing. It's a minimum of a 2-week intensive workshop. That's a minimum. We're experimenting with different models, and as we all, I think, can appreciate, different people have different ways of learning in a space. And there aren't a lot of describers that are classically trained out in the universe. There are a lot of, I think, describers that are freelance that may have self-training, but there's a very specific expectation of what I'm going to experience in description when I go to the theater, if that's how we're marketing it. If we're marketing it as a described show, there's an expectation of what that means. And so it's really important to make sure that the quality is very high, which means that we're not pumping out describers like it's a factory line, right? We want to make sure that there's a high level of quality. And some of the things that we might focus on in describer training would be things like verb choices, right? And here's just one of my favorite examples is you can say that the character walks, walks to their car. But how many different ways can you talk about travel by foot? Walk, strut, glide, gallivant, right? Skip. There's all sorts of really interesting active verbs that change the way and add different layers of information to my experience of what that character is portraying on a stage. So a walk is going to be very different than a strut. And so if I just, hear a sentence over and over that says they walk, they walk, they walk, it gets kind of boring, right? So we work on sentence structure so that all the sentences don't sound the same. We work on verb choices. We work on the describers picking the moments that are the most important to the plot of the show. As you can imagine, we live in a world that is based on a visual experience. So if you're watching a stage production, just as one example, there are maybe 1,000 things happening on the stage at one time, probably more visually. And you as an audience member who can see the stage can be looking at any one thing at any one time. So there's lots of things you could choose to describe, but what are the important elements that must be related to me as a blind person in order for me to understand and follow the show in an equitable way? It's a real challenge to be able to do that, and it's a real art form to be able to do that. So that's some of the things that the describer training might include. And typically people who become describers are already theater professionals. They have an understanding of the theater landscape, what happens in theater, can think on their feet. For example, if something happens spontaneously on stage that wouldn't necessarily have happened as part of the show. And I remember one instance, I think it was the musical Hairspray, I believe, where one of the wigs came off the character and it wasn't meant to happen. It just happened on stage and everybody started to laugh. And sitting in your seat as a blind audience member, you're wondering why people are laughing. What's the joke? What am I getting? And so the describer, able to think on their feet, was able to say, oh, there's a bit of a costume malfunction happening at the moment, and kind of explained that moment to us so that we were all in the loop at the same time. The describers, there's a photo on this slide, wear what's called a stenographer's mask. And I mentioned to you earlier that only the VocalEye patrons hear through their ear set the describer, and that's because the describer is speaking into this stenographer's mask. So it's a little bit, we lovingly refer to it as the Darth Vader mask. It doesn't change the sound of your voice, but you cup it over your face and you speak into it. So the microphone inside catches your voice, but it's sealed around your mouth so that there's no sound coming outside of the stenographer's mask. So if you were curious about how it's done, that, my friends, is how it's done. On the next slide is just a photo of one of our describers standing with the stenographer's mask over his mouth, and also has his script with his description. So it's the script of the play and his descriptive notes in there so that he's following along the dialogue, and then he knows when there's a pause and he can go in there and add in, what the action is that or the visual gag or whatever it is he needs to describe. The next slide is accessibility consultation. So VocalEye also offers this as one of their services. People with disabilities who have been trained in specific areas like audio description consultation, for example, can be requested for consultation. So we work hard to train folks in the community. I do this. I am a consultant myself. So if somebody wanted to reach out and say, oh, I'm interested, I guess for example, this exact presentation, right? This could be considered a consultation. But oftentimes artists, arts organizations may reach out and say, oh, we're looking for somebody to have a listen to something that another describer not part of VocalEye or another artist not part of VocalEye has written, just for, again, to look for that that framework that's in place, that expectation of what the community is going to experience. So that's also a service that we offer. And the next slide is equipment rental. Yes, if you have your own event that can benefit from the use of our equipment, you can rent our equipment from us, of course, as long as it's not already being used in for another theater production. So our equipment is available for rental and has been rented successfully for some occasions of other user groups in the disability community. I think some neurodiverse communities have used it before for some of their programming, so it is available. On my next slide, I wanted to talk a little bit about in-person programming. So on this slide is I guess the definition of how we work with a variety of theaters and a variety of theater venues to describe their shows. So we're not creating the shows. We work with many different theater companies. One of our biggest partners is the Arts Club Theater Company, who just did The Sound of Music over the holiday season. So some people may have been aware. So for example, with that show, we work with the Arts Club. They pay us to come in and do the description of the show. And then we work with them on making the show as accessible in other ways as possible. For example, ticket pricing and some other things, which we'll talk a little bit about later. We also work with the theater companies to look at other things that need to address accessibility. We can't just say, oh, the show's accessible and expect people to come. There are all sorts of other reasons why people don't make it to shows. And a lot of it is about capacity, how busy their day was, transportation to get there, the weather, whether they had enough money to purchase a ticket. Those kinds of things are also barriers. So VocalEye does a lot as an organization, but also with other theater companies and theater partners to try and make these barriers as few as possible so that as many people in our community can experience the theater. And as I just alluded to in a few sentences earlier, is about your tickets. When you get your tickets, you're not purchasing them from VocalEye because we're not the box office. You do need to phone the Arts Club or the Gateway Theater or the Culture Theater, whatever theater you're going to go to see their show. You're going to purchase your tickets through that theater company. So VocalEye is not, you don't purchase your tickets through us. We work really, really hard to try and get some discounted tickets for the community. It's not always a successful journey because each arts organization and theater company gets to dictate their own ticket pricing, and that's just the reality of it. So we work hard to advocate for a ticket price. Usually it's a 50% off ticket or a buy one, get one free ticket. That's really what we are trying to advocate for. Sometimes it's really successful and sometimes it's not successful. But know that that's something internally we're trying to do to help mitigate that access barrier. On the next slide is the ticket access program. So the reason I mentioned the ticket access program is because not all the theater companies can or want to truly, but can make their tickets at a more barrier-free price point, I would say. VocalEye has what's called a ticket access program. This is something you do access through VocalEye. So what does that process look like? Well, first off, I guess what I'll explain to you is it's a program that offers up to 50% off, up to 2 tickets. So that's your ticket and a companion's ticket. The companion doesn't need to be a blind person. They can be a sighted person, but one of the two of you needs to be a VocalEye user to access this price. So 2 sighted folks are not going to get this discount. And unfortunately, it doesn't extend to me as one blind person, and I have 6 friends that are all sighted and we all want to go to the show together. I can get one ticket discount for one additional person, and the rest of those folks are going to pay their full price. The reason that we do that is because we recognize that a blind person may not want to come by themselves or may need extra access. So like they're coming with a sighted person who drives or wants to be their sighted guide, and they don't need a theater buddy, right? So the idea is that they can bring a companion at a discounted price. What does that look like in theory? And not in theory, in practicality, what it looks like is I want to go see The Sound of Music. I'm going to call the Arts Club box office because that's where the show is playing. I'm going to say, I need 2 tickets to The Sound of Music, and they're going to email me those tickets. Fantastic. Once I get those tickets, they have a price point on them, and I email those tickets to VocalEye, and I say, I'm going to the show. We have all the information that's on your ticket, and we will write you a check for up to 50% off of those 2 tickets, up to 50% off. If you're going to buy a $500 ticket, that's not going to be something we can reimburse you $250 a ticket for. So there's a little bit of I guess some fine print there. So it's up to 50% off. But typically in the theaters that we're at, it covers half of the ticket price. And so when you come to the show on the night that your tickets are for, we will give you that check with your discount. So you do have to come to the show to get it. If you miss the show, then you're calling the box office and hoping you can get a refund on your tickets. And that's not something VocalEye does. But the Theater Access program has been put in place by the generosity of donors because we recognize that not every theater company can offer a ticket discount. And even if they can, if their ticket price is $50 and they offer it to you at $25, that $25 may still be too rich for you. And so you come to VocalEye and then we give you 50%. So then you pay $12.50 for your ticket, right? So we're really trying to work on a holistic approach to access. On the next slide is some of the upcoming shows that we're doing that are live in person. This is not all of them. This is just some of them. But you can find the full list on our website, and I'll give you those details later. So Forgiveness is coming up. 2 dates described in February. Forgiveness is a beautiful story of Japanese Canadian POW and internment camps, and a whole bunch of stuff that's culturally relevant to the Japanese Canadian experience. The Call is something that's coming up. This is a kind of a dinner party amongst friends, which is a really interesting show. And of course, when you have your friend couples get together, antics ensue, and some secrets might be spilled. Teenage Dick is coming up. I'm really excited about Teenage Dick. Think Mean Girls meets Richard III. So Mean Girls meets Shakespeare. And it's done a lot of it in very relevant today language. So it's not done in a lot of old Shakespearean language. So really easy to digest. And what I'm really excited about this one is that it has 2 performers that have lived experience with disability as primary main characters. And that is so near and dear to my heart as an actor myself, but also just in this goal of increasing representation of the disability experience on our stages. So it's not just our audience perspective. We want to see our community on our stages all the time. So Teenage Dick's coming up. Sense and Sensibility is coming up. Old Stock is coming up. It's a refugee love story. And that's going to be in Victoria. And Beautiful, the Carole King musical. So if you're a Carole King fan, come see that one. And $1 Million Quartet. So it's just a few of the live in-person theatrical performances that are coming up. The next slide is our Almost Live events. So the Almost Live events are our online weekly presentations. To date, we've done 105 of them. So we are quite well versed. I host them myself. These happen every Wednesday night, starting back on January the 18th, because we took a little time off for the holidays. So back on January 18th, they start at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. And we have a little sort of social chit chat in the lobby with community members. And then at about 7 o'clock, we roll with our entertainment for the evening. And we do all sorts of things. We do audio dramas, we do virtual tours, we do these really fun events that are kind of cultural highlights of different programming. So for example, we did one on the Rocky Horror Picture Show. which is really culturally significant to the fabric of where we are in arts and culture, and has really made an impression on the arts and cultural landscape. But if you've never seen the visuals of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, how do you know, right? So we would share clips of the songs and talk through the descriptions of the characters, and it's fun. We did the same thing for Halloween over Little Shop of Horrors, which was a great event. So we do a lot of those. We explore opera. We explore making the universe artistically accessible. All sorts of things that we do. Gallery tours. It's immense, the amount of different options that we have. And everything's followed by a Q&A with special guests in the space so that the audience can ask questions of the content we've experienced. And of course, it wouldn't be what it is without every night following with a prize draw. Everybody loves a prize draw. Our events usually last between 90 minutes and 2.5 hours. 2.5 hours does seem long, but sometimes it's a play. That's, when everybody pivoted because of the pandemic, theater companies were filming their plays, and their filming techniques got quite sophisticated. So they had invested in all of this equipment, and now some companies are still filming in order to live stream their programming. So we get a copy of the film and we do the description and we integrate that into the film, and then we play it. So we're basically watching a filmed version of a live stage production with audio description. So we do a lot of that and have some great readings coming up. We also do a lot of programming that showcases the work of artists that live with disability as well. Artists that have had documentaries made about them, all sorts of really, really fun stuff. So these these almost live online events are designed to be accessible for people who are blind and partially sighted, but they're also open to others to join. We do ask that you register to join, first-time registrant. And once your first-time registration has been completed, it's a simple sort of Google type form. If that's not accessible for you, you can call us or email us and we'll take your information. But this is just so that we can keep our space as safe as possible from Zoom bombers and that kind of thing. But once you are registered, then you'll get a weekly reminder of what's coming up, and you never really have to go digging for the information again. Okay, the next slide, I just wanted to share with you some of the online events that are coming up. So the East Van Panto, which was a Little Mermaid theme, was one of the theater companies that I was just talking about, did a live production, and we did describe it live, or we were going to, but some of you may very well remember that we had a major snowfall, and on one of those weekends, the snow was just too thick and the community couldn't get out to the show. But we were lucky to be able to have access to the video version of it, and so we're going to play that in the next couple of weeks, which is fun. Your Eyes, My Vision is a project that's coming up with blind artists who were paired with sighted artists to do different arts projects. And so we're going to walk through some of the photos of the art that was created through that project. On Constance is a lovely book that I'm actually reading right now, an audio book. So we're going to have the author of that book coming to do a live reading of this particular book. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and we really enjoy live readings in our space. It's really quite a privilege to have somebody read to you live. My Sister's Rage is coming up. The Canadian Museum of Human Rights is a virtual tour. I had the privilege of going to the Human Rights Museum, and I took back a whole bunch of information. So we'll be sharing some of that coming up. Star Wars versus Star Trek. Remember I told you about the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Wow, what are the visuals of Star Wars? What are the visuals of Star Trek? For folks who are blind and partially sighted who may have been missing out on some of these visuals, this is going to be a really interesting opportunity to experience some of that. My Mother's Story is going to come up in May. This is going to be a collection of stories that people have written about their mothers. And there's a very unique set of writing framework. It's a very easy way to write, but it's a unique way of writing. And the community is going to do a series of workshops to learn how to do this writing technique, to write about our mothers and to share that content. So there'll be a bunch of short stories to tell about our mothers. And then another speed date with the Cosmos, which I was telling to you about earlier. This is really fascinating. Working with the blind community, and Christine Malik, who's a blind person who works with the Chandra space telescope, and really has this way. So the Chandra has this way of taking the photos of outer space and turning them into sound. to make them accessible, or as accessible as possible for folks who are blind. So that's fascinating. Shaken Not Stirred is coming up. This is, again, just like Star Wars versus Star Trek, only it's James Bond. There are so many James Bond films, and we're going to explore some of the different James Bond films together. So that's a lot. And it's just, I mean, it's a handful because we do it every Wednesday. So it's just a small handful sampling of the various things that we do. On the final slide is connect with VocalEye. We invite you to connect with us. We're doing lots of exciting things. Maybe you want to consider being a theater buddy. Maybe you work in the theater and you're interested in learning how to do description. Maybe you're blind and you want to come to shows. Maybe you have blind friends that you want to tell about our programming and bring to shows. There's all sorts of ways to be able to participate in what we offer. So you can reach out to us in a couple of ways. VocalEye.ca is our website. Here's where you can subscribe to our newsletters and register for our Almost Live Zoom events. You can find our Almost Live events that we've recorded on our YouTube channel. There's a link in this slide, but really what I do is I Google YouTube and VocalEye. VocalEye is one word, and it comes up pretty quickly. You can email us at info@vocaleye.ca if you have any further questions, and we'll get back to you in a timely manner and take whatever steps we need to make you feel included and make the process as accessible for you as possible. So with that, I don't know if there are any questions or thoughts from folks, but thank you for letting me share just a little bit with you about VocalEye. I could make a whole 4-hour workshop just on VocalEye. It's near and dear to my heart, and I was a founding board member of the organization when it first began, and now I'm the associate director. I live with blindness myself, and I'm an artist and an actor and a creator. So I know what it's like to be on the stage. I know what it's like to be behind the stage, and I know what it's like to be in a theater seat. So accessibility is really important to me, and this is just one way of being able to welcome the blind community, blind and partially sighted community, into theater and arts and cultural spaces. And we're doing lots of really fun stuff. So with that, thanks for allowing me to join your space.
Hi, Amy. It's Allison.
Hi, Allison. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Happy New Year. Happy New Year, friends.
Happy New Year.
You already know all about VocalEye. Have you got any questions?
I'm writing an email to Donna right now about any opportunities about theater buddies and for the training for the I forget what it's called now.
For the describer?
The audio describer, yes.
Well, I can tell you that at this particular moment, we don't have any describing trainings happening right now because we have 2 apprentice describers that we're working with. So that's going to be a whole year process before we likely do that again. But yeah, Donna will be able to give you all sorts of information.
But you know what? That's actually perfect because sorry for the background noise. Just too many things all at once, right?
Yes, I hear you.
I was just thinking because I'm graduating with my master's within 6 months. So
good for you.
It's a work, it's a process.
Yeah.
But I was thinking like by this time next year, I'll be able to have more time to do that.
Yeah.
So it's all in good timing.
It's yeah, I mean, it's since we're talking about it, as you know, when you do presentations like this, a lot of this is really high level stuff, right? Like we don't go into the weeds of all the details, but I'll share with you if you're, because it sounds like you're interested. The describers themselves will see the show like up to 3 times, usually 3 times. If it's a really complicated show, they may see it more, but 3 times they go see the show live, and they take their notes and they craft their notes, and there's a back and forth between some of the describers writing their notes and then consultation within the organization to finesse those. And all like there's a real process to create it, which is why I say it's an art form all on its own, because and it's very labor intensive. So anytime I sit in a space where there's description, I feel so, I hate to say that I feel grateful because, but I just feel so privileged to be able to experience that, because I know what an effort it takes. Like it's exhaustive to do it, but it's like so appreciated that I get access to that. Right. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, thinking about it, like it's not just for blind or partially sighted people. Like when I sat in, and I'm sighted, like I get it, that I have certain privileges. But for those who are neurodiverse, when I sat in with the Shakespeare, I got Shakespeare. Like it builds on different disabilities, not just, and I think you get that as well. Like, even though it's meant for one disability, one particular disability, it helps other disabilities. It has that domino effect.
This is what good access does, right? Good access is good for everybody. And often what I say, like even my own family. So if we're watching a movie, I don't know, the last movie we watched was one of the Jurassic Park movies. And I had the description. We saw it in the theater first, and I had the description, and my family did not. And then it came on TV one afternoon, like years later, right? But same movie, with the description, and so we were all listening to the description. What was interesting about that was they were giving me the names of the dinosaurs, right? And they don't give you that if you're just watching the movie. So I got all this extra information about the names of dinosaurs, the scientific names, and I, still didn't help me. It didn't help me in the sense that I was like, I don't know what that kind of dinosaur looks like, but it was interesting. The same thing with like these Marvel superhero movies, where it's like, it tells you that it's Captain America or it's like the Black Widow or whoever it's talking. Whereas like I saw this movie with my mother, and she was like, I have no idea who any of these people are, because they don't tell you that when you watch the movie. You need the description. So good description is good for everybody. But I do know that there are some neurodiverse folks who have used the system and have experienced that it's like overwhelming for them from an auditory perspective. And that can happen, but as you say, it's it's focused on the blind community, and our medium is audio, right? So if it works for other folks, that's fantastic. You are welcome to give it a go. And if it doesn't, well, you gave it a try. Well, no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, I see that, and I understand that it's no harm, no foul. Like you have to really try it before you can say, oh, this works for me, I'm going to go forward, or hey, got to try something else. It's my mom is, you got to mind my mom. She's a diabetes nurse, and she works in diabetes care.
Yep. And
her motto to every patient that she has, you can tell that I have elephant ears because I listen to everything. She says, you're a science experiment of one. And I kind of take that from the diabetes care into kind of my own practice. I'm a science experiment of one.
That's cool. Yeah, I like that. I might have to borrow that.
Right? And of course, my nickname as a kid when I was younger was Elephant Ears. Because I listened to everything.
Yeah. Elephants also never forget. So if you have a good memory, it's also a good
No, I have a pretty bad memory.
Well, I'll stick with the ears reference then.
Yeah. I do like eating elephant ears, the bannock, the fry bread, but
with the sugar and the cinnamon.
Cinnamon.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Childhood favorite. But as a diabetic myself, I haven't had one in years. Literally. Years and years and years.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's fattening.
There's not a single thing that's healthy about it. Maybe the cinnamon. Maybe we can stretch to say the cinnamon was healthy.
Right? Oh, random question for you. So I volunteered at the Writers Fest.
Yeah.
Eh,
I remember you were my
so
second
much.
guide.
Yes.
Yeah.
So much fun. That was so much fun, and they did a good job, I think. Not perfect, but there's room for growth, which is always a plus.
Yep.
And I did raffle tickets mostly. And I was thinking about it, like that's one area that could use some accessibility, like, excuse me, but how do you do accessibility for raffle tickets if someone chooses to, who wants to buy a raffle ticket? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when we do VocalEye fundraisers, so I'll sell raffle tickets at the VocalEye fundraiser, and somebody who's blind buys a ticket because you can read the 8 numbers and they're like, I don't know what my numbers are. I can't read those numbers. So I write their names on the backs of the tickets. Now, of course, the Writers Festival is much larger, but if you have somebody who's blind, if you're going to sell me raffle tickets, and maybe you say, okay, can I just write your first and last name on the back of the ticket? So when you pull it, you can say, I can read you the numbers, but there's a name on this ticket. So the winner is Amy. And that's kind of how we address the accessibility of that particular type of thing. But as you imagine, it can be quite time consuming. So it might be something that you offer to somebody that you can identify as, has a guide dog or a white cane. Instead, because if you sent it to everybody, then you'd be waiting for everybody to fill out, their 10 tickets or whatever with their name on it, kind of thing. Because you have to put your name on each one. But on the back, there's space to put your name on them.
Yeah. So that's one part. But like another part is that, like, when I was doing Writers Fest, I was walking, and I had a board with all of the prizes that you could win. Like,
right.
How we could do that as an audio description as well.
I think that's something that, and I'm on the Writers Fest accessibility team, so I do know that that their approach has been to take things in manageable steps, which I think is the right approach. Otherwise, we risk doing things poorly, and then there's the community. You're not building community, right?
Right.
You're not appreciating somebody's experience. So it's better to have, in my humble opinion, and the humble opinion of many others, it sometimes is better just to have something like, for example, the raffle tickets, not accessible, than to try and like make it accessible, but not in the right way, right? Because it just causes more stress and more anxiety. So, in the meantime, it's like, okay, as a blind person, do I have a sighted person read it to me, or do you read it to me because you're carrying that around? And you can say, oh, by the way, let me tell you what the prizes are that you win, right? In future, I would think that having this available on the website in advance is the most helpful thing, because people can go on their own terms to the website and check that kind of thing out, right, in advance. So I would say the same thing. Something that VocalEye's working on doing. It's a large project, but looking at the theater venues and what's accessible within our theater venues that we frequent mostly. But that would include things like, how much does it cost for a glass of wine at the bar, right? Because when I get to the bar in the theater, there's often a sign, but it's on a wall and it's really small and I can't read it. Some theaters, we've been able to have Braille signage, which is lovely, but if your menu changes, then it's outdated pretty quickly, right? The easiest way to do that is to put that on your website. So it says, when you come to our theater, check out our concession stand. And if you want a chocolate bar, it's $2. If you want a can of pop, it's $3. If you want a wine, it's $8, whatever. But then I know going in advance, I also know that you have a bar. Because I think one of the reasons why blind folks particularly don't approach the bar is because it's just too much work, right? So the websites can be really, but the website also has to be accessible, right? So it's, you can put all the information you want on a website, but if it's not accessible, that also is a thing that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I'm actually, another thing I have to do today is email people at Fringe Festival, because I want to do accessibility with them, to put it on my resume. This is what I was able to do, da da da. And I think that's one of the things that I'm going to I'm going to consider and talk to them and say, we have a bar. We not only have a bar or a couple of bars, but like pricing on the website, like make for the alcohol, if you choose to want to come, right? And what type of beer or alcohol do we have? You might, like for me, I'll go onto the website to see the menu, even though I'm sighted, so I know, oh, maybe I don't want to go there because it's too spicy and I don't like spicy food.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's one thing to be able to list things that you have control over. So if you have your own bar, right, then you have control over what's there. If you're going to say to people, check out a local establishment, because Fringe is usually on Granville Island. So it's like, check out the Keg or the Sandbar or whatever. You can't put all their stuff on your website, but you can put a link to their websites, right? Like these are our partners, and maybe you get a ticket discount when you eat at those places, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
What would be helpful for Fringe Festival is for them to have an accessibility committee, just like the Writers Festival does, right? To get a group of people from different disability like cross sections to speak to these different things, because where the danger comes in is when you have one person speaking for all groups, right? And that it can work in some scenarios for sure, but Fringe Festival is something that, like the Writers Festival, runs over and over and over and over and over. So they should be, I would think that encouraging them to build capacity to have a committee of, I don't know, like 8 people, so that you've got, someone with sight loss, somebody who's neurodivergent, somebody who's using a wheelchair, like it's different cross sections of folks, to be able to talk about all sorts of things related to access.
I have a feeling,
check into the Writers Fest and connect with them about how they do it.
I have a feeling, and this is between you and me.
Well, in the live stream that's watching.
I'm the live stream that's watching.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that I'm going to push for more stuff, like just push for.
The best thing we can push for is an advisory committee. It's really the best thing. Then that gives people with disabilities the autonomy to speak for what their needs are. Yeah.
Oh, I met, I forget their names, really nice couple from VocalEye. Both are on, it's a couple, both are on the board.
Sean and Christy.
Yes.
They're the only couple that's on the board, so it was an easy guess.
Because I, first year volunteering for the Push Festival, and they talked about VocalEye at the Push Festival.
Will you be there tonight?
Yes.
I will be there tonight too. I'm doing Access 101.
So yeah, they were so good that I was to be able to be patient with me when I did sighted guide.
So now you've done it twice.
Yeah. Oh, they were.
I'll have to talk to you outside of this about your experience with the different programs.
Yeah.
But we'll wait till the recording stopped.
Yes, but they, just as an aside, they were so patient with me. Thank goodness.
Good. That's good.
Oh, but if you ever talk to them or bump into them,
I see them.
I was really
just about.
I was quite appreciative of them being patient with me.
That's nice.
But yeah, so just one other thing before I get off.
Sure.
What's the difference between a doctor and God?
Oh, I don't know.
God doesn't think he's a doctor.
I have to tell that one to my doctor next time I see. Well, my many doctors. I'll have to gauge that one, see what they think. That's good.
Yep.
Awesome.
But thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Anytime. I'm so happy to do these things.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege to be able to talk about things that you love, right?
Oh, yeah.
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 And for both you and I, access is such a passion. So it's such a joy and such a privilege to spread the word.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it. It's really worth talking about it. And hopefully with any luck, my like the radio show that I do,
Yep.
I'm using that as my
It's part of your master's, isn't it?
research.
Yeah.
Yeah, for my master's. So like the voices are actually will be in academia instead of, I think that's one of the biggest inaccessible things is that you're not really hearing the voices.
Mm-hmm.
And I also believe that those who do study disability, they're not really from the disabled community
Yeah,
as
often not.
much.
Yeah, often not.
And like for me, being part of the disability community and have like we can be a little more honest with each other, a little more comfortable with each other.
Mm.
It's,
Yeah.
That's my viewpoint.
Are you looking forward to the finishing of the masters?
I am. I'm a little worried. Like now, afterwards, like now what?
Well,
Right?
what will be your credential after your masters? What's the
It would
title?
be M-A, it'd be MAIS at the end of my name.
Which is masters in.
So Masters of Arts, Interdisciplinary Studies.
Okay.
So then, if I, let's say, had wickedly amazing grades and it was amazing, right? And they decided that, I should go into my PhD program. Unlikely, but that'd be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Then I could say Doctor DR at the beginning of my
with a
name
PhD.
with a P.
Yeah.
But because
Just trying to figure out what kind of work your MAIS gets you. Like what field of work?
because the MEIS on its own would not get me anything essentially. Well, it could give me some stuff because my thesis is in disability, so I could do some consultation.
Yeah.
But I also have a library tech diploma,
Oh, okay.
so I could blend the two together and do accessibility in libraries.
Yeah.
Because that's a big, I mean, we have CELA, but that's only for print disabilities.
Yep.
Like there is a little bit of accessibility for libraries, but it's not great.
Yeah.
Right now, like we have audiobooks, but like also with DVDs, like libraries have movies. Like how do you do?
Have you heard of Canopy in libraries?
Yes, Canopy is more academic, isn't it?
I don't know what it is, but somebody wants me to check out their work. They make some like documentaries and stuff, and they're like, I said, where can I find it? They said, oh, it's on Canopy. And I thought, I don't know what that is. I said, well, check your library. They should have access to Canopy, but Canopy with a K.
I've vaguely heard of it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, so I'll have to check it out. They're also from the States, and I said to them, well, maybe we don't get that in Canada. They're like, no, you get that in Canada. Well,
it could be some of them don't. A lot of the smaller libraries might not get it because it can be quite expensive.
yeah.
Well,
I'll be in the area of the Vancouver Public Library this evening.
Yeah,
so I'll pop in and just ask them while I'm down
you
there.
know, those you probably have seen it. Those online articles, academic article platforms like a Besco host.
Yeah.
A Besco host is $30,000 a year, to $40,000. Like it's wickedly expensive.
Well, CELA, you have to pay for CELA too. That's why some people have CELA and some people have NILS.
Yeah.
So
NILS.
Yeah.
I've never heard of them.
Nels is like Sela, only they don't do any braille. They do a lot more audio, computer generated audio. I prefer
Okay.
Sela because it has human narrated audiobooks, but Nels has computer narrated audiobooks. NNELS, National Network of Equitable Library Services, or something like that. So here in
Yeah.
North Van, where I am, my library only offers Nels. They don't offer Sela. Yeah.
That's annoying.
Yeah. So
Well,
there
and
you go. But
it's all,
it's because it costs a lot of money.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not, I mean, it's nice. There are some things that I would be willing to listen to with a computer voice, and some things I don't want to listen to a novel with a community voice. Maybe a textbook, maybe a manual, but not a novel,
Yeah.
because you're listening for like the smile in somebody's voice, or that, like, you're listening for those extra cues when people read books out loud. You don't want it to sound like at one run-on long computer sentence with no inflection and no tone and no diction and mispronounces words all the time and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I've been read all the way, but they're way more expensive, as you can imagine. So
Yeah. My family adopted my aunt and uncle's dog for 4 months. It's a golden named Boo,
oh, nice.
by the way.
So
Boo doesn't know his name.
you've been a busy household then.
Yes, so I just saw Boo leave with the dog walker.
Ah, nice. How come you're not walking the dog?
Well, I'm here.
Yeah.
I mean, and the dog, my walker, needs the money.
Well, there you go.